Taliban celebrations across Afghanistan as the final US troops leave the country. They've pledged to enforce strict Islamic rule, leaving many scared and bewildered, especially the Brits trying to come home.
I would say we were going to die here. We were going to die. My kids and families, they were going to die here.
Also tonight, the 4-year battle over Geronimo the alpaca is over after he's finally put down.
A special ceremony for a special athlete.
Dame Sarah Storey is now the most decorated Paralympian ever, and she's not done yet. And would you believe a 9-year-old drew this? We meet the boy they call Dorset's Da Vinci on the show at the Royal Academy.
This is the ITV Evening News with Charlene White.
Good evening. After 20 years of war, tens of thousands of lives lost on all sides and billions spent, the final American soldiers stepped off Afghan soil last night and flew away into the darkness. Watching them go were the Taliban, back in control and now kitted out with abandoned US military equipment. They celebrated victory, firing bullets and fireworks into the night sky. But it's a frightening moment for those left behind by the West and an uncertain one for the world watching. Our global security editor Rohit Katra reports on the end of America's longest war.
In Kandahar this morning, a wave of white flags marked the moment that the Taliban could claim to control Afghanistan again. ITV News saw how the end of America's presence was being welcomed in the second city. And in the first city, gone were the American C-17s at Kabul airport. It's Taliban fighters wearing smart military uniforms who are now on the tarmac.
امارات اسلامی افغانستان با آمریکایی‌ها از راه دیپلماتیک روابط حسنه می‌خواهد. اگرچه آمریکایی‌ها اینجا شکست خوردن.
The Taliban took over last night of a 20-year American mission. The final soldier on the final flight, one small step in the history of his country and of the one he left behind. The gunfire that followed was to celebrate what the US calls withdrawal and the Taliban calls victory.
Now, US military flights have ended and our troops have departed Afghanistan. A new chapter of America's engagement with Afghanistan has begun.
But there are those who were left behind. We spoke to one British man still in Kabul.
I would say we were going to die here. We were going to die. My kids and families, they were going to die here because everyone, and then here, we know I'm British citizen. My kids' families are British citizen. Yeah. Boris Johnson, please help us to come out, to get out from here.
We're inside a compound of villas in Doha, built for next year's World Cup. What's become Little Kabul, a village for those who managed to escape during the last few days, and where last night they watched withdrawal from afar.
So what does today mean for you?
It doesn't mean anything for me right now, because I don't know about the next step, what's going on.
And for Afghanistan?
For Afghanistan, nothing. A dark day will come in Afghanistan.
Abdul was an interpreter for the US military who managed to make it to Qatar with his family after the Taliban arrived at his front door.
I knew it that if they will capture me, they will cut my head. Just one thing was, I was thinking with myself, I know they will kill me, but what should I do with my family? I know that they will kill me in front of my family.
It is now over for thousands of American soldiers. For millions of Afghans, it is not. Rohit Katra, ITV News, Doha.
Well, following that withdrawal, President Biden is due to address America tonight. Our US correspondent, Emma Murphy, is in Washington. Emma, what are we expecting to hear from him?
Well, I think we'll hear from him that he has delivered on his election promise to get America out of Afghanistan. He will say that he was good to his word, or his Biden word, as he's so fond of saying. But he's going to have to be very careful with the tone, because this is not a victory. This is defeat. America left Afghanistan with ISIS and the Taliban at their heels. And they did not get all Americans out, and they certainly didn't get all of America's allies in Afghanistan out of that country. So he is going to have to make a nod to the chaos and the trouble of the past few days, but I think he will be very keen to stress what his foreign policy is going forward, and that is a foreign policy of America first. It may not go down terribly well with the international community, but it will play well at home, and that is the electorate that he's playing to in this address.
Emma, thank you. Well, here, Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab has told ITV News he isn't sure how the withdrawal from Afghanistan will affect our security. What's also unclear is what the future holds for those Afghans and UK nationals who are not evacuated from the country. Our political correspondent, Cole Dinnan, has the stories of people who escaped and those left behind.
Home at last. Layloma Hafizi had gone to Afghanistan for a family funeral. At nearly 80, her daughters feared she might not make it back. But today she was finally released from quarantine into the arms of her family. With her daughter translating, she says part of her hasn't left.
For the past 10 days I was quarantined. My mind, my soul, my heart, everything was back in Afghanistan. I couldn't stop worrying and fearing and crying and tearing for those people who are still stranded and stuck in Afghanistan.
Afghans in southwest London fear there's little the UK can now do to protect their families. They certainly don't believe Taliban assurances that there will be no reprisals.
I'm very afraid that real violence is just due to happen now that the Americans and the British soldiers have left. So the main fear is that now the Taliban said, OK, the Americans have left, the British have left, let's go and get those people from Afghanistan who have worked with them.
The Taliban also claim they'll prevent the activities of organisations like Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State group in Afghanistan. But will they?
Do you think this country is safer or less safe than it was 3 weeks ago?
I think it's very difficult to say, but look, over the last 20 years, we haven't seen a terrorist attack from inside Afghanistan. We've got to work with all of our partners, hold Taliban to their promise, never to let that happen again.
But as things stand, we don't know whether we're safe or not, so we might be less safe as a result of this withdrawal.
I think it's very difficult to judge at this stage.
And there's also a question over whether the Taliban are able to police Afghanistan.
I think the real problem is whether they are capable of preventing terrorist attacks. I think the West has to remain vigilant, has to be willing to hit ISIS targets if we had good intelligence, but we should be trying to do that in cooperation with the Taliban, however bizarre that seems.
In cooperation with the Taliban. That's how much the world has changed in little more than a couple of weeks. Well, that cooperation, if it ever comes, is still some time away. For now, the world is holding its breath to find out which Taliban has really taken control in Afghanistan. One that lives up to its commitments on women's rights and international terror, or one that reverts to the brutal repression of old. And all that Western diplomats here and in Washington can really do is use what feels like very limited influence to try and encourage a more outward-looking regime in Kabul.
Carl, thank you. Now Western forces have left Afghanistan. One concern is the fate of its children. 10 million need humanitarian aid, with many going hungry. Last week on ITV News, we saw footage of a young girl who came to symbolise that suffering. Aisha was found asleep and alone on the streets of Kabul. Thankfully, she now has a new home of sorts, but there's so much to be done to deal with the growing crisis children like her face, as John Ray reports.
She'd seemed lost to the streets and her own thoughts. A little girl adrift in a world traumatised by conflict. We can only guess what perils she'd faced. But this is Aisha now. She's found a tented home, found friends and found her voice.
Aisha.
She tells us her name, but so much of her story is still lost in the chaos of Kabul.
Aisha was found in a street in Kabul where she was collecting plastics like other children. We found her a family who are willing to take care of this little child. But she's not alone. There are thousands of children who have the same story.
Now look, Afghanistan. What's going on in Afghanistan?
We first came across Aisha last week asleep by the side of a busy road, a wretched emblem of a shattered nation.
Look, people are walking. This is a main street, and she's sleeping here.
She is just one of an uncounted number of displaced or orphaned children, scattered across Kabul, whose only shelter is the sky. Boys like Hamid Ullah, whose father was killed in the war, who now cares for his younger brothers.
Across
the country, 10 million children are in need of help, says the UN, which warns that though the West troops are gone, this is no time to abandon Aisha and the next generation of Afghans to their fate. John Ray, ITV News.
Well, still to come on the ITV Evening News. Sir Alex, this is for you. Ronaldo pays tribute to his old boss as his move to Man United is confirmed. And The Apprentice hoping to become the master on why he loves to draw.
I find it really fun to just get into the nitty-gritty details and just like pick out every single wrinkle or every single spot.
Those stories and more after the break. Welcome back. It's been a day of records for Britain's Paralympians in Tokyo. One of the team's newest stars, swimmer Rhys Dunn, broke the world record to win his third gold medal of his first ever Paralympics. And competing in her 8th Games, Dame Sarah Storey's 16th gold made her our joint most successful Paralympian ever. It's a title she could hold outright before the week is over. Lucy Watson reports.
Sarah Storey.
Dame Sarah Storey is very familiar with celebrating victory. She knows what weighty jewellery feels like, but the enormity of her achievements in Japan can't fail but affect her.
A special ceremony for a special athlete.
This is the 16th gold of her career. No wonder she's beaming.
I was just over the moon. I've been waiting for this race for such a long time. This is the one that I've been able to put the most preparations into, and it couldn't have been a more perfect race this morning.
This has the potential to be a landmark ride.
So many times we've watched her single-mindedness and strength eclipse the competition. Dame Sarah's been collecting medals for 29 years, at first dominating in the pool, then switching to the track. She's been at 8 Paralympic Games. Gold today makes her Britain's joint most successful Paralympian.
Dame Sarah Storey.
It's a career that can inspire others to greatness. George Peasgood got bronze in his road race. Benjamin Watson picked up gold in his. 5 years ago, Ben was watching the Paralympics from his desk job back home.
I can't really put into words, really. It's amazing having this big old heavy piece of metal around your neck. Once in a lifetime experience. Hopefully maybe get some more experience like this. And all the hard work we've put in over the last 4 or 5 years has really come to fruition.
Today's accolades now mean that every member of the British cycling team has a medal. Quite the achievement.
This is a superb performance from the British swimmer.
Rhys Dunn powered to his 3rd gold this morning, with a world record to top it off. The sound of the national anthem could ring out again for Dame Sarah on Thursday if she makes it 17 wins and becomes our most decorated Paralympic athlete. A view from the top that is comfortable. Lucy Watson, ITV News.
The alpaca Geronimo, who made headlines as campaigners fought to keep him alive, has been put down. He tested positive for bovine tuberculosis twice, and the courts agreed he should be destroyed. This morning, police and DEFRA staff arrived at the farm in Gloucestershire and took him away. His owner said she was devastated by what she called the government's barbaric actions. Sangeeta Lal has the story.
This was the moment Geronimo's supporters had been trying to prevent for years, but today the fight to save his life was over. Run! He's been the centre of a legal dispute since 2017, but he can no longer escape his fate. Leave him alone! Protesters make one last attempt to save his life, but nothing could stop what was to happen next. Unable to catch Geronimo in the field, officers cornered him inside his pen. He cried as they prepared to take him away.
They've come in here and they have forced the death of a perfectly healthy animal.
From DEFRA's perspective, though, he needed to be put down because he tested positive for bovine TB twice, and they had to do what they did today to protect other animals.
No, they didn't. They misused the test. I want them to start producing open, transparent data and just be honest.
Geronimo, though, had to be removed. According to the government, he was, they said, an infected animal that had to be put down as a last resort.
We tested him twice and he was positive to that test. And that test indicates that he has been infected. He has the presence of antibodies there that could only be there if he had had natural TB infection.
Geronimo was put down early this afternoon, something the government said had to happen, but an outcome no one here wanted to see. Sangeeta Lal, ITV News.
A 16-year-old boy has been arrested on suspicion of murder after a 61-year-old man died from a head injury in West London. Mahmoud Shamshi died in hospital after being found injured in Hounslow on August the 18th. The teenager was taken into custody and has now been released on bail. Passengers arriving at Heathrow Airport have faced another day of long queues to pass through immigration checks. One wrote on Twitter that a queue for families with children was 3 hours. Heathrow said the delays were unacceptable. And Plymouth and Cornwall remain cut off from the rest of the rail network after a Tesco lorry crashed into a railway bridge in Manameet yesterday. Network Rail apologised and said services would be affected between Plymouth and Totnes until tomorrow at the earliest. Cristiano Ronaldo expressed his never-ending love for Manchester United today as his return to the club he left 12 years ago was confirmed. He signed on a 2-year deal from Juventus in one of the biggest transfers of the summer. Well, Hannah Miller is outside Old Trafford for us, and I'm sure there's plenty of excitement there, Hannah.
Yes, it was the announcement they'd been waiting for all weekend, Charlene. Confirmation that Cristiano Ronaldo is heading back to the club where it all began. On social media this morning, he said that anyone who knows him knows about his love for Manchester United. He told his 300 million followers, "I'm right here, I'm back where I belong, let's make it happen once again." P.S. he added, "Sir Alex, this one's for you." It's thought he still sees Alex Ferguson as something of a father figure, the man who helped to launch his career. From here, he went on to win more than 30 major trophies around the world. He'll be back here on a 2-year contract, and fans have high hopes that Ronaldo's experience will be a real boost for the team. There will certainly be a buzz when he steps back out here on the pitch again at Old Trafford. He says he can't wait to be back. The fans can't wait for him to be back either.
I'm sure they can't, Hannah. Thanks very much. Finally tonight, sitting somewhere in classrooms across the UK could be the next Pablo Picasso, David Hockney or Tracy Emin. Anyone searching for such brushstrokes of genius might want to check out the Royal Academy, where these creations, they're gorgeous, aren't they, are among the works of hundreds of talented young artists being showcased. Well, Dan Rivers went to meet the artist who created this piece. He honed his skills during lockdown, apparently, and is known as Dorset's Da Vinci.
His exceptional eye for detail has been compared to that of a Renaissance old master. But the 9-year-old boy, dubbed the Dorset Da Vinci, whose stunning sketch has been included in the Royal Academy's Young Artists Summer Exhibition, is modest about his talent, saying the secret is simply to keep practicing.
I find it really fun to just get into the nitty-gritty details and just like pick out every single wrinkle or every single spot, and then when you stand back every so often, it sort of comes together.
Mum Simone was as astonished as anyone by the flowering of her son's artistic skills.
It's incredible, really. He's got a photo reference, and from there he just does, it's bigger than a life size pretty much, and it's incredible. We were really taken aback.
Lucas's eye doesn't spare any detail, not even a light airbrushing of me.
I think you'll agree that Lucas has captured my likeness in brilliant, almost excruciating detail. But what's interesting is that he's particularly honed his skills during lockdown, like many of the other children who entered this competition.
The Royal Academy chose Lucas's sketch along with 571 other works from 33,000 entries, submitted by young people with a passion for capturing the world around them.
They won't all be the Leonardo of Dorset, but I think if they can have the confidence to try, and importantly for us as well with art making, sometimes the confidence for it not to go the way you wanted it to.
Dare to try, and as Lucas has shown, if you keep trying, the results can be sublime. Dan Rivers, ITV News, Dorchester.
Goodness me, he's brilliant, isn't he? Right, that's it from us. Julie's got your news at 10 later. But for me and the whole of the evening news team, you have a great evening. Bye-bye.